workshop between the Common Council and the Oshkosh Sustainability Board regarding the ICLEI, which stands for International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. This is the milestone. So at this point, I'll turn it off to. First, we should do introductions. I think we almost all know each other. Mr. Roloff?
Sure. Mark Roloff, City Manager. Thanks for coming tonight.
Caroline Pansky, City Council.
Jan Scalpone, Sustainability Board.
Ben Stepanek, City Council.
Lori Palmieri, City Council.
Margie Davies, Sustainability Board.
Kathy Tunis, East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning.
Elizabeth Williams, Community Development Department.
Michelle Bogdan-Metzel, Sustainability Advisory Board.
Steve Herman, City Council.
Steve Cummings, Mayor.
Alert and Blessingame, Sustainability Advisory Board.
All right, at this point, I will turn it over to Margie and
Okay, well,
Bennett.
thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to meet with the council and explain the reduction target that we're working on. We've actually been working with East Central with Kathy for, several months now, and she's got a wonderful presentation for you that she'll go through, and then if you have any questions, would you prefer they hold the questions till the end or ask as it goes along?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, do whatever you like. Okay, Kathy.
Okay, well, thank you again for allowing me to come and talk to you. This report was done under East Central's Technical Assistance Program. Each year, East Central solicits projects from our member communities in 8 project areas, so this was done under that. I'd like to also thank the Oshkosh Sustainability Advisory Board and the ICLEI, Education and Outreach Government Action Subcommittee, for their input and assistance in preparing this report. I'm going to go over a few things. The background, an overview of the process that we took to develop this report, a summary, a little bit of a summary of milestone report number 1 that's been completed, a short and mid-long-term reduction targets that the Sustainability Board set, potential strategies that the city could do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and then next steps. First of all, a little background about how we got to where we are now. On September 11, 2007, the city signed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And one of the things that this did was committed the city to meet or surpass the Kyoto protocol target of 7% reduction of 1990 levels by 2012. You are not alone in signing this agreement. Actually, since 2005, 1,060 mayors have actually signed on to this agreement. This represents slightly less than 89 million citizens. And 20 mayors within the state of Wisconsin have signed on to this agreement. ICLEI has, you also committed to adopting ICLEI's 5 milestone reports. ICLEI stands for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. Milestone 1 report was completed on May 6, 2013. This report is the second report in the series to set a reduction target. The next step will be to develop a climate action plan, then a plan to implement that plan, and then to a plan to monitor the progress and report on the results. But first, a little bit of a background. There's 2 types of greenhouse gases. The first that we talk about, the first is carbon dioxide, or CO2, and that is released whenever fossil fuels are burned. So they produce electricity to heat buildings, to run our cars and things like that. And the second one is methane, which is CO4, and it's a byproduct of organic waste and sewage decomposition. So it's the leaves, the paper, things like that. And methane is 21 times more powerful per unit of carbon than carbon dioxide is. There are climate change effects that are happening in this area that can affect the city of Oshkosh. The average global temperature is rising. We're getting more days of temperatures above 95 degrees. And this puts added stress onto young children and older adults and people with medical conditions. There is an increase in the demand for air conditioning, which increases electric usage and our carbon footprint. There is an increase for water usage as we water our lawns. People need more water to, if they're thirsty. The extreme weather conditions. We're getting more intense storms with like heavy downpours, and this causes flooding, and it causes the increased runoff. You get erosion, and more sediments are washed into our streams. The water doesn't have a chance to infiltrate into the ground. It can raise the temperature in our surface water resources, so you can get more the blue-green algae in Lake Winnebago. We are seeing diminished winter ice cover on our lakes in the area, and this can lead to more erosion. It can, while it can increase our growing season is increasing. Actually, within the last 57 years, our growing season has increased by 2 weeks. Warmer temperatures will stress our crops, and we're getting an increase in pathogens and disease. And wetter springs, which we're also getting, could delay planting of crops. Our plant hardiness zone is also shifting north, so that means that some of the plants that we're used to here may no longer be in this area. A little bit of what we did to develop this report. We started talking in July of 2016. We initiated the effort, and we reviewed the milestone #1 report, and we established a project baseline at that time. In August, we actually looked at researched the reduction targets set by others, so we'd have an idea of what targets should be set in the city of Oshkosh. September, we reviewed those reduction targets, and then we set short, mid, and long-term reduction targets. And then we talked about how could the city reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And so we looked actually at the city strategic plan that the council has adopted, the 2015-16 strategic plan. And we identified major accomplishments that have already been completed in the city and by others. A little bit of milestone #1 report. This represents, well, actually there's two parts of milestone 1. There's the municipal operations, and then there's the community-wide operations. Municipal operations represent about 2% of the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in the city, whereas the community-wide represents 98%. The report set a baseline of 2007. And the municipal operations report was actually completed in 2009, portion of it, and the community-wide was completed between 2011 and 2012. Of the municipal operations, it looked at 7 sectors, and those are the 7 sectors that are represented. The purple represents wastewater, and so 28% of the emissions are actually attributed to wastewater in that sector. About a quarter in buildings and facilities, that's the blue one. Streets and traffic signals, about 17%, and that is actually the red. And then the sources of greenhouse emissions, by far, electric is the largest source. About 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions are the result of electric production. Natural gas is second at 11%, so there's a big gap in there. Okay, we looked at the community. The report looks at the community-wide emissions, and so the colors that you're seeing there, commercial is red, and this is over 5 sectors that were looked at for the community-wide. Commercial represents 32% of the emissions. Transportation it's the purple color, and represents about just over a quarter of the emissions. Industrial just is 23%, and it's the green, and represents just under a quarter of the emissions, and then residential is blue, about 19%. Again, the sources of greenhouse gas emissions, electricity is over 50% is due to electric production. So why would you want to set a reduction target? The purpose is a focal point for local action and change, an objective to strive for, in which progress can be measured, and the ability to quantify commitment to fighting global climate change. As part of this, we researched other targets. There was a number of targets that have already been set that we researched. We looked at the Kyoto Protocol, which was 7% below 1990 levels by 2012. We did not research the Paris Climate Conference talks, but they can be used as a justification. Those were done in December of 2015, so that was after we had actually set the targets. But it does show that the targets that the city has set is within line. What the U.S. has, the intentions that they said, they stated, this was the base year of 2005. They set a short-term target of 17 set below the 2005 base year by 2020, a midterm of 26 to 28% below the 2000 base year in 2025, and a long-term target of 80% below the 2000 base year by 2050. Things have been also done in Wisconsin. I think everybody's heard of the 25-25 commitment, which is a 25% of energy will be by renewable energy by 2025. Governor Doyle also had a governor's task force on global warming, and that was back in 2008. They produced a report, and that report set a short-term reduction of 2005 emissions by 2014, and a midterm reduction of 22% by 2022, and a long term of 75% by 2050. There are hundreds of local governments across the country, representing 14% of the U.S. population, that are actually studying their greenhouse gas emissions, just like the city is, and is setting targets. So you are not alone. Madison, I know they're kind of big, but within the Wisconsin, Madison has set greenhouse targets. They are also working with ICLEI on the 5 milestones. They have adopted them. And they set a long-term target of 80% by 2050. Fitchburg is another community has set targets. They set a short term of 77% by 2012, midterm by 11% by 2020. And Janesville is also working with ICLEI, and they set a long-term target of 75% by 2050. Right in our own Fox cities here, the city of Appleton is also setting targets. They are not with ICLEI, but they are also setting targets. They've set 25% below the 2000 base year for municipal operations by 2025, and 25% below the 2005 base year per capita reduction by 2025. They've set other ones too. Kakana actually signed on to the 25-25 agreement, and because they are a municipal utility, they actually are looking at setting, their target was 34% of their energy emissions would be by renewable energy by 2025, and they would have zero energy growth. So when the Sustainability Board looked at setting the targets, we started with the long term and what ultimately the Sustainability Board thought the city should set. And what the long term was 80% below the 2007 baseline by 2050. This target is based on long-term reduction targets recommended by ICLEI and others and reaffirmed in the recent Paris Climate Conference. They next set a short-term target of 25% below the 2007 baseline by 2025. And the rationale behind that was that they felt that by 2025, the city would have an opportunity of adopting all 5 milestone reports and would be able to reach that reduction target. Finally, they set a midterm target of 40%, and that was set as a midpoint between the two. We had a little discussion about that, but you need to set targets so you have something to aim for, so you can see how your progress is going. The benefits to Oshkosh, one of the big benefits is resiliency. And resiliency is defined as the ability to recover from setbacks, adapt well to change, and keep going in the face of adversity. And as resources become more scarce, Oshkosh will be in a better position because of actions taken now to adapt to climate change. You won't be reacting to things later on. You'll have already gone down that path, and you'll already have made changes. Money spent today to improve energy efficiencies will save money in the future. Electricity in Wisconsin is essentially generated mostly from non-renewable resources such as coal and natural gas, and these will continue to rise in the future. As energy costs continue to rise, by investing money today, Oshkosh will be in a better position tomorrow. In 2009, the Oshkosh received an Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant from the Department of Energy for $634,100. This grant was used for a wide range of projects to improve energy efficiency and conservation. Annual cost savings from that grant alone, it resulted in annual savings of $132,000. And if you look at that over 7 years, that's close to $1 million. That's $934,000. That's money that Oshkosh can spend elsewhere. It's not going to energy usage. And then because of that grant, Oshkosh also received a $55,000 grant from Focus on Energy. And that was also used to do retrofits to additionally save the city money. As the city replaces old equipment and vehicles and adds more efficient new equipment and vehicles, this will continue to add to the cost savings that the city will be seeing. Attraction of millennials and cutting-edge businesses. This will position the city to attract more talented and brighter workers to live in the city. These are people that are seeking walkable, bikeable, progressive communities. The Oshkosh graduates would attract the Oshkosh graduates to the city to remain here after graduation instead of leaving and going elsewhere, and to attract cutting-edge businesses seeking high quality of life elements such as schools, higher education, parks, talented workers, and other amenities. The city will be recognized as a leader in climate change and energy issues. They'll be progressive. They'll be recognized. And it does lead to higher quality of life, air quality, less particulates from electric, gas, and fuel usage, housing affordability, money spent to increase energy efficiencies in owner and renter occupied housing can be used to improve housing stock and properties. And then the creation of green jobs. So how will Oshkosh achieve these targets? The first step, or the next step in the process is to develop a climate action plan. This is milestone report number 3. And this plan is a roadmap to how the city can get to those targets. It'll identify policies, programs, regulations, and funding to achieve the climate reduction targets. It looks at how far the city has come in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and identify new and proposed measures to be implemented and select actions for the climate action plan. The plan also will include anticipated costs, funding, implementation, time frame, and responsibilities. And it will identify procedures to monitor progress toward achieving that target. The plan will be developed with multiple stakeholders. It's beyond the Sustainability Board to do this alone. The City of Oshkosh and the community has already done actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As I mentioned, the 2009 Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant is estimated to result in an annual reduction of 1.8 million pounds of carbon dioxide a year. Other activity in the UW Oshkosh, So on the other end, with the community end, the UW Oshkosh is also making strides. They've received national recognition for their green activities, and they've established a plan to eliminate fossil fuel usage by 2025. The Oshkosh Area School District is making improvements, as are the businesses, industries, and residents within the city. We all want to spend less on energy. So the other thing that the Sustainability Board did was they looked at potential strategies to achieve the reduction targets, and they looked at what the city was already doing. And the city has adopted the your 2015-16 strategic plan, and the Sustainability Board identified 12 initiatives in progress that would help reduce the carbon gases. 10 of those initiatives would actually affect the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by reducing commercial, industrial, electric and natural gas usage, residential electric natural gas usage, and reducing transportation gasoline usage. Two of the existing strategies that are in the strategic plan, and these are things that are already being worked on, are reducing vehicle fuel usage for gasoline and also diesel. There were 5 strategies that were in the strategic plan that have not been implemented yet, but some of them are being talked about. 9 of those would affect the community-wide emissions, reducing the commercial, industrial natural gas usage, residential natural gas usage, reducing gasoline usage. 11 of the strategies would affect municipal operations, reducing electric usage for buildings and facilities, natural gas usage for buildings and facilities, vehicle gasoline and diesel fuel usage. And if you add those up, it's over 15, and that's because some of them will go both ways. The city may also want to consider a Green Tier program. It's a Legacy Communities Green Tier Charter program started by 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin in 2010. The benefits of doing this is that the community would have direct access to resources that would provide technical assistance to the city. It's a voluntary program, and it recognizes and rewards environmental performance. So again, the city could be recognized as a leader. Municipalities take actions and share information to achieve superior environmental performance, water quality and water resource management, sustainable practices. So this may also assist the city in achieving sustainable recognition, like I mentioned. So what are the next steps? The Sustainability Committee is looking for approval by the Council for milestone report number 2. And then they would like to start working on developing milestone report number 3, which is to develop a climate action plan. There will be costs associated with developing milestone number 3. As I mentioned, milestone number 2 was developed under East Central's Technical Assistance Program. Milestone number 3 is a much larger report. Our free technical assistance program for communities would be more than what we could cover under that. But there is potential options of support for maybe UW Oshkosh through the Senior Capstone Project.
What is the approximate cost of that milestone number 3? No idea?
ICLEI is advised that it would be between $50,000 and $100,000 to complete it, but that depends on how much staff and community support would be going into it. But just if a consultant were hired, it would be between $50,000 and $100,000.
And that's it.
When is the next measurement? So if our baseline was done, for example, on the city operations in 2009,
the baseline was 2007.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was done in 2009.
It was done in 2009, but the baseline was set at 2007.
Okay.
And actually, when they looked at the baseline, they looked at, I think, 3 years and set 2007 as the baseline.
So when would that be measured again? We're already 7 years out. Or, well, more than that now, 9 years out.
The baseline will remain, so you'll always be going off the baseline.
The goal is to complete all the milestones and then monitor. So we would monitor, it probably wouldn't make sense for us to monitor until we got to the point of actually implementing activities and going through the process. So it would be set by the climate action plan and the monitoring reports that come further. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into doing those inventories, so you really want to make sure that you're doing them at a time that makes sense. So the SAB, based on our conversations, wanted to get through all of the milestones before they did another inventory.
And doing the inventory did take several years, and we used a lot of volunteer hours through the Sustainability Board and through planning, so it's not something that we would do lightly until we know we're ready.
How many years do we expect the final steps, the final milestones to complete?
I think it would depend on how much support there was from either community partnerships or funding from a consultant to complete it. So far, it's taken about 2 years per milestone with just volunteer support.
We could be at 2025 before we even get done with the milestones.
Not quite, but close.
So by approving you're asking council to approve the second milestone. Are we ready to roll that out, or is it, a lot of that stuff might be in place with CNG vehicles. We have a program through the Public Works, as far as grass clippings into the stormwater things. We're working on stuff like that. Our sanitation trucks, our CNG. So just, are we hitting most of these things, or you mentioned that we're missing some of the things? So what are some things that, as we start to work into our budget this year and next year, and we just had our strategic planning, that you would like to see us do to help you, or vice versa? Just
to be clear, Steve, milestone 2 is simply setting the reduction targets.
Okay, so
which we have spelled out for you here.
Right.
And as soon as that's approved, then we can move on to milestone 3, which will be the climate action plan.
Okay.
And there, of course, we'll be asking for lots of help. All we want is money and staff and time. And no, I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm not talking about
anybody else. Okay,
so put everything.
All of which are rate limited.
Yes, I understand that. Believe me, we've learned that.
Okay, so by approving this, then this is complete, and we move to the next phase. Is kind of what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean we keep an eye on
No.
reducing those costs along the way.
Right.
Oh, no.
Those energy costs
And the city has been.
And we've been documenting those in our annual reports that we, handouts we have at the State of the City. Those tend to show a lot of what the city's been doing that's been helpful.
I do have one question, and I don't know, Liz, maybe you can answer this. So if the city were to, let's say, continue growing and expanding, theoretically annexing land, growing in size and developing more, how do you see that impacting or creating a moving target for us here?
Your baseline is always going to be your baseline, and what we've done with the community-wide inventory, we've actually done some evaluating past 2007. So we are seeing business as usual as we are operating today as a community, increases in greenhouse gas emissions. So through the climate action plan, you would identify strategies to take that from going up to going down. So if we continue business as usual, growing, even with the reductions we've been doing, there has still been an increase in emissions over time.
So far, our efforts have been concentrated, the things we're tracking are concentrated in municipal, which is only 2%, and then communities 98%. So that goes back to our mission to educate and inform also, and get community members on board, and the university and the school district, they're doing their own things, but it needs to be a group project, basically.
How do you or other communities, how have they got the community involved?
Do we need somebody answer to that?
I mean, it's a number of ways. You get involvement through regulations, so mandating certain development, requirements for new construction or adaptive reuse. You'll see communities getting involved by promoting activities like we're doing here through neighborhoods and community gardens. Really, I think a lot of the big gains you'll see come through infrastructure improvements, your green infrastructure, energy efficiency measures. That's where you're going to see your biggest return in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Also shrinking the footprint of our built environment.
Correct. I mean, that's another opportunity, if there were growth restrictions put on the municipality, but of course that would have to come through the regulations, which I mentioned.
So did you guys look at it all? In some communities, I've read about how they've reduced the minimum, for example, residential or commercial building envelope size for energy savings and carbon reduction.
Those are the type of recommendations you're going to see in a climate action plan.
And that forced a lot of people to move out of the city to build. I want a 3,000 square foot home. I can't do it here. I will go elsewhere. Which then, as we talked the other night, discourages more residential building for our tax base.
I think, though, you will gain people because people want to live in a progressive community. They're looking for a community they can walk around, they can bike. They're looking for that. I think that you will gain people that are looking for that kind of lifestyle too.
And there are people who already live like that who are looking for ways to do even more. So they're here, they just need the opportunity to do it.
For example, I think that the Morgan district, right, originally the plan that came forward was less dense, fewer units, and then, if I'm not mistaken, community development came back to them and said, this is great, but we need you to make this denser, so putting more units in that same space, so that kind of indirectly shrinks that footprint, but still providing additional housing.
Mm-hmm.
We hear a lot about the millennials. What's the next group after the millennials? We're basing all of our discussions on millennials. What's the next?
Digital natives. They're called digital natives.
You ask. Are we spending too much time on the millennials and not focusing on the group that follows the millennials?
But then I was at a meeting today focusing on the senior community in Oshkosh, and over 25% of our population in the city is 50 and above. And yet we're lacking not so much resources, but are we a safer community for senior citizens? Are we providing walking and biking trails with lights and things that assist the senior citizens who can't see as well, have fall issues and things like that? So I think it's really wrapping yourself around all age groups and making the community as best as possible for everybody that lives here. And if that attracts millennials, if that attracts seniors, if that keeps citizens here, keeps students here after they graduate and work here, I think it's all of that. And so, all these initiatives are important no matter what age group you're targeting, and you don't even have to target an age group per se. But to your point, millennials like to bike, they like to walk, they like to be within distances of their jobs and things So they don't have to drive, they don't have to go out shopping real far away. They can do things much more closer, sustainable. That's why the neighbor gardens have become popular. Some of the smaller parks have become popular because they're closer to residential areas. And so all of that is important as a community.
You have to focus on all age groups.
Yeah.
I think that that's one thing that I've learned about sustainability in the last 10 years is that it not only encompasses every department at City Hall and every group that we have in the city, but it also is all-inclusive age-wise.
Sure.
And it's important that we help seniors understand better ways for them to cut energy costs or whatever, but also we have to make sure that we're educating our second graders and getting them on. Actually, I think we do it about, 3 years old, Michelle? Probably they're better out then, right? So it does have to be, it has to be a goal of everyone.
Right.
Yes, all-inclusive.
Yes,
Right.
all-inclusive, yes. We're like an all-inclusive resort here in
That's
Oshkosh.
right.
Right. I think it was just listed as kind of a perk that it would also attract those people. Not that we don't want to attract anyone else. I think it would attract, lots of different kinds of people, a very diverse group. It wasn't meant to be exclusive.
No.
Okay.
Does council have any more questions? We have 5 minutes.
Well, I appreciate the work that this group does. It's kind of like hard to wrap yourself around some of the discussion items and things that you work on. And so it is important. I've seen the organization or this committee at the farmers market and at the State of the City address. And I know East Central does a lot of work in this area and with a lot of communities. So it's important because of our waterways, which is very important. And I think we've improved the quality of life in our communities, and a lot of that has to do with the reduction of some of these issues. And it continues to be on the forefront on the national level, state level, and local level. So we just keep pushing, keep working.
We do appreciate any support that the council can give us. Just supporting the fact that the Sustainability Board exists and recognizing that. Of course, approving some of the things we bring to you is always appreciated, because by the time you see it, we've probably got a couple of years into it.
Right.
And of course, offering us direction, as you did with the city garage, and said, please, have your input on this. We welcome the chance to have input on things, so please feel free at any time. But if you'd like to prove this now, then we'll move on to milestone 3.
Do we have a sense of how long that would take, the milestone 3, to complete the climate action plan?
Again, it's going to depend on the support that we get, whether we are doing it all with volunteer labor. You get it, Lori, you know.
Yes.
Martha?
And
Go ahead. No.
given that, frequently in sustainability discussions, we're talking about 7 generations out. You're right. It's not just the millennials. It's the grandchildren and the grandchildren's grandchildren that we're looking at. And I do believe that we had in our most recent strategic plan discussions about resiliency for the first time, which is encouraging.
Well, and if we continue business as usual, we may not have 7 generations, period. So it would probably be good to act on it sooner rather than later.
You plan on putting this on the agenda for approval?
Well, this would be for council to approve the target itself. The next step, the devil's in the next detail, because the work of milestone 2 is effectively done. It's just council approving it. But it's how do we get to step 3? Because once you set the target, then it's the plan, and then it goes to Lori's point. Well, kind of the mixture of all the discussion that took place. If we were to commit, just for the sake of discussion, $100,000, that means that the plan would get done much quicker. Then it's good. That's when the true rubber is going to meet the road, and what are the impacts? What are the regulatory impacts and things like that? And that's where people start to get a little antsy, because setting a target is easy. I want to lose 20 pounds. I can set the target. I can set the target. It's really how do you get to the target is really the rough spot.
Well, that's the thing too, the cost, is that spread out over X number of years or just 1 year?
Well, that goes to Margie's point, because Margie said, you give it, if it's all volunteer work, then it goes to Lori. Lori said, well, if you base it on what we've done, it'll take us till 2025, and then it's like, okay, well, now how's our target doing at 2025? Well, now we're told that, using the weight analogy, well, you got to lose 20 pounds in 1 week now. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen, so that the whole plan is going to...
But that's not exactly true, because the city is making strides toward losing. So every year that goes by, you have done things, and your community partners such as UW Oshkosh and the school district and your residents and businesses have all done things. So people are taking steps to reduce. So it isn't exactly, you're right, by the time you measure it, you'll have less time, but you are making strides every day.
And did I understand you correctly that because we received that block grant, that conservation block grant, that allowed us to achieve like almost double?
It was 132,000. Yeah, it was more than double in the time period. If it depends on how many years it is, but if it was 7 years, because it was 2009,
right,
that would be 932,000 or something like that, over $900,000 you would have saved. As energy costs go up, those savings are going to go up. And in new buildings and equipment that you purchase, you're not going to have to retrofit them, because you're replacing less efficient things with more efficient things. So you won't be spending the dollars to retrofit them, because you'll already have done it when you build new or you buy new.
I can tell you that we saw the numbers, the first full budget after the energy efficient, no, it wasn't even Public Works. It was in this building, in the library, in the museum. We could see those numbers. The real question, though, is, and I don't know if we can totally measure it, Kathy, and it's a CO2 reduction, and we could do the greatest job in the world, but we're only 2% of the problem. It's if everybody is buying a car and we're still doing those emissions, that's going to be the real issue. Because I can tell you, from water usage and energy usage in this building alone, we went down to, we went up to a 13-year payback. Anything 13-year payback or less, we implemented with the money. So that wasn't too bad. Above 13 years, it was a little tougher to pull off. The only things we've continued since then are street light and traffic signal LEDs. That's been one that we've continued, because we saw the impact. You could see it in the ledger, and it was very positive.
One way that the city might look ahead would be that as you're completing infrastructure with the streets, if you're having that infrastructure include ways to, at some point in the future, have charging stations for electric cars, then you've already got that covered, which will then make it more desirable for people not to buy the Suburban that's running on diesel or a lot of gas, but buying a car that's electric and is going to be using that. And that
Lynn put you up to that, didn't she?
No.
Lynn parks next to me in the parking lot.
I know.
And I knew you were teasing me about that Suburban. I know.
You have a Suburban, Mark? I didn't even know that, honestly.
I
didn't.
Now, through confessions.
Oops.
We're going to have to draw to a close.
It's a good thing. I think maybe a minute ago would have been better.
Just one real quick thought, though. Apparently, in Canada, they've developed technology for use these turbines that are used in the water lines, which can produce energy. They're very interesting if you get a chance to look at those. I haven't seen numbers in terms of how much energy it's producing, but they're little spherical turbines.
To push water through?
Yeah, so the water, as the water goes through the water lines, it creates energy. So something to look at.
Yes.
I've been to just add a word here. I have a really bad delay, and so it's been hard to talk. But before we close, could I have a moment?
Sure.
Yeah, I just would like to say that studying these milestones, milestone 2 would be helpful to the city as well as to the Sustainability Board, because as the city moves forward with the strategic plan, it gives you kind of another set of targets to be looking at. And while we might not achieve those goals, it gives us another layer to be considering about for our community. So it's not just how livable is our community, what is the wellness, what is the wealth, but it gives us this other measure to be looking at. But I think that as time goes on, Oshkosh is going to find itself in a really enviable place that we've had these conversations and that we've prepared for different scenarios that are predicted to come up. So we're not going to be arriving late at the game wondering what's going on. So I think it's really, it would be wonderful to have the support of Common Council for us to be able then to move forward and figuring out how to do these reductions within the framework of the strategic plans that Common Council comes up with.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Six.
Burton, you were patient. You were patient with them.